So Oliver, thank you. Thank you very much for being our guest today.
Pleasure.
A warm welcome from Gilles, myself, and the Acosphere team. You were the Executive Director and Chief Investment Officer at the Africa Finance Corporation, where you oversaw investments, strategic formulation, origination, and business development, the portfolio management and execution of investments across a wide range of products, including structured products, sovereign lending, project development. You have over 35 years of experience in infrastructure development, investment, public-private partnership, and strategic advisory. You have been successful in developing and investing 40 billion, am I reading this right? $40 billion, and you originated $100 billion of infrastructure deals across the African continent. That's what I call impact.
Go
ahead.
No, I'll have to correct those numbers because when you say a project is 40, when you say the total is 40 billion, it means the total project costs of everything that we participated in an investment was $40 billion. And of the $100 billion that were originated, only for, we did not invest in every one of them. It's projects that we came across, projects that we saw. So it shows you that the market exists in Africa.
Thank you for that. You're a non-executive director of several companies. You're project director, lead transactor of several landmark projects, including the 350 megawatt SunPower Pune IPP. So a lot of Pan-African infrastructure platforms. You are pioneer chairman of Africa Infrastructure Development Association. I won't give all the names of all the boards you're in because it's just so impressive. I don't even know how you manage all of that. But I do know that I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about some of those boards that I'm really interested in. So Oliver, welcome again. And let's kick off with the questions. You're chairman or member, sorry, no, you have just retired from the AFC, only to start your own business, a company called Tocam Capital. What is your story, Oliver?
The story is one of a young boy growing up in what was then Bathurst, Gambia, and at a very young age, in my teens, suffering from osteomyelitis, which is a form of polio, and having to leave school very early on. I think it was about 16 or so, and having to be bedridden, and being shuttled between hospitals in the Gambia. And I remember l'Hôpital Principal in Dakar. And finally, I think after the 3.5 years, getting a very big surgery in Diakonista Systersyn in Copenhagen. But I think that period was one that I think changed me, because lying on your back and staring for the ceiling and having your plaster of Paris, which is up to your chest, being taken out once every 9 months, you have a lot of time to think and reflect. And in between, of course, when very good friends came to visit, but most of the time you're on your own because his colleagues are at school in those days. And I was determined. I listened, I was a vociferous sort of listener of the BBC World Service in those days. It was in the early 70s. And I was determined to do something for myself once I got out of that bed. And on crutches, I remember starting went to Hull in the UK and enrolled in a college, which was very easy then to get into because I passed the entrance exam and they accepted me. And for the next few years, I finished top of my class in electronics and electrical engineering in the Merchant Marine, and was a Merchant Navy officer here by the time in my early 20s. And I went around the world for the next 7 years. I tell everybody that was my first postgraduate degree, because for the next 7 years, I just had an extremely wonderful time visiting nearly every country in the world with a seaport. you know, and went to some beautiful cities. You know, the San Francisco's of this world, your Cape Towns, your Curacao, etc., etc. But I also worked with a lot of people and learned a lot of things. So you can imagine in the early 70s, this young boy, you know, with a limp, African, qualified as a merchant navy officer, when in fact in the majority of those ships I worked in fact nearly all of them, the majority of officers were actually non-Africans. So it wasn't taken too kindly in those days. But I think you know, you made, you know, individuals, when say you can't describe the collective nature. Yes, there was intense discrimination in those days. And I think what's made me stronger is that today is that I went through all of that and I stood by it and I learned from it and I survived it. After that, I was just determined even more so. After 7 years at sea, I'd done all I wanted to do, visiting everywhere. When I got paid handsomely, I decided to go and back to school. University of Wales, did a postgraduate degree diploma, got out with a distinction, and I was accepted in the business school. In fact, we were the first MBA class of the Cardiff Business School, which was before the Center for Graduate Management Studies. And I went to that, came out with an MBA and decided to do an MBA specializing in finance. That essentially was it. When everybody went to the city, I decided to go and work in Sheffield with the then Blunkett, who later became, he was leader of the council, and he later worked for Tony Blair as Home Secretary and a number of other positions. But what challenged me there, in effect, was it was under the days of Margaret Thatcher, and here was, if you like, a socialist republic within Britain in the heydays of the Thatcher government. And I quickly began to realize, although my title was Business Development Officer, that they had other ideas to do regeneration. I picked up a few things, learned a few things, and I think that nurtured me also in my continued development in regeneration, in infrastructure development, which I later brought into Africa. But I think that was the first taste I got out of it. Again, it wasn't easy because you were doing this job in if you like, in an institution that was very much socialist oriented, and you had to play ball. But again, you were brought in there to help develop small businesses and be part of the regeneration team. I remember, I think we discussed this before, I remember in that interview for that job, some thought I wasn't black enough. And that was rather strange, quite frankly, because I think what really they meant was that I didn't, I mean, first of all, I was not vocal enough in my anti-racism. I was spoon-fed, and I came from business school. What would I know about being in the streets and stuff like that? And I took that rather badly in the interview, and had to tell the chairman that if they thought I was not, having suffered what I suffered throughout my life, then I would rather not take the job. And they persuaded me to stay, and I got the job. But it also shows, I think, people that it's not all jobs that you can take at everybody's conditions. There's some things you're going to say, look, if this is not going to work, it's not for me, and you leave. But that also, it's a good thing I stayed, because I said to you, it did help me and did give me an insight into regeneration activities. And today you can see what Sheffield is like. They held the World Student Games just shortly after I left, and a city that was once just doing steel and cutlery and all those kind of things has now changed into a thriving metropolis. So I then decided after a while to go and work in the city at a time when there was a privatization of the gas and electricity industry. And I thankfully got a job in CGB, which then became National Power. I see that from then on, I again stayed with them for a while. So I witnessed actually public sector being transformed into the private sector, and the things you have to do, and the different culture that has to be in place. And again, change management, because this was a massive change management, not just for culture, but also for processes, for even policies, for, and all sorts of things. And I think that experience helped me. I was in the business review department, internal audit and business review. So that, I think, helped me, which later became useful in how you design organizations, how the politics, in fact, within organizations, and the policies also that you have to ensure that you have good governance, because that's the foundation of what will bring you growth and development. So that was helpful as well. Left there, decided to come to Gambia. And I came to Gambia, I think, shortly after I got married in 1992, January. And I left in 1996. I think I came to come become the business development manager. I ended up in 1994 as the managing director. Again, I was very fortunate at that change of time with a change of government. There was a coup d'etat, and there was a change to civilian regime, and I was one of the 8 people nominated to write the new constitution, which we did, but which was then manipulated and passed on a version that we did not put across, was put to the people. But that's another story. But I left having fallen. I feel. Really, quite frankly, not. I've seen policies of the then regime that I did not like. This was in the early days, and I saw the direction they were going, and I think let me respectfully say, we parted ways. That led me back to the UK, and as soon as I got back to the UK, I went again into project development, and the rest, they say, is history, because that's where, when AFC was born, AFC came to ask me to join. To join the company at the very birth of AFC in 2007. So I became one of the founding or pioneer executives of the AFC, where we built an organization with a 1 billion balance sheet to 8 billion by the time I left.
Wow.
That's essentially in a nutshell. As I always say, I think all this background that I bring was almost to train me and help me in the jobs that I would meet, because I'm a passionate about Africa's development. Extremely passionate in all spheres, but more so, I think, in the infrastructure development space, which is what I think I'm qualified to do. And of course, when you do infrastructure development, there's a whole ecosystem that you have to deal with, and also how you manage that ecosystem and find your way within that ecosystem. I normally tell people is, you go to a country and people say, oh, the government was, didn't help me or whatever. I said, which part of the government are you talking about? Are you talking about the Ministry of Justice or the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of the Environment? Because they each have different cultures. Are you talking about the chairman of the local authority? Are you talking about the city council? You need to understand how to, when you want to do stuff and when you want to get success in this ecosystem, you know how to maneuver. And first of all, understand the culture of those organizations and how you maneuver around them. So essentially, that's my story. That's where I ended up. I hope I contributed a little bit in the projects I brought. And what I'm very pleased about in my career is that we were able to bring novel solutions to infrastructure development. Everything we did was novel, and it was novel because we were looking at it, taking world best practices, but actually making sure they were African, distinctly African in character and in the implementation. And that's what I think is the way to go, in my view, if we want to develop our continent ourselves.
Thank you so much, Oliver, for sharing. Could you kindly share with us a couple of anecdotes, maybe one or two, related to the challenges and opportunities that you faced in building your career?
Well, I think with a name like Oliver Andrews, you're gonna get invited. Let me put it that way. But when you get invited and you walk through that door, believe me, I have seen people gasp. But the best one I've seen actually was from an ex-military guy who I went for this job for a CEO's position in an African country. I won't name the country. And he at least was decent with me. When I walked into his door, he said, "Oh, what a pity." And I said, "So what do you mean?" He said, "Look, I don't want you to waste my time, and I won't waste your time. My client is in Africa, but doesn't want a black man."
Wow.
That tells you a lot of our continent and how we think about ourselves. And we still do if we don't have some other race within our teams. We doubt ourselves.
Yes.
We get credibility amongst ourselves when we see other experts. It's sad, but true. And until we begin to believe ourselves and begin to know we went to the same Acosphere, we went to the same universities, we went to the same thing, and then, we have particularly the African context, I'm not so sure we're going to be helping. We will talk about development, but in practice, I'm not so sure how far we'll go. Let me give you an example. If I'm doing an infrastructure project, and all the lawyers, all the engineers, in terms of putting the project together, are not African, if I don't give opportunity to local council, to local engineering firms, to local environmental firms, even when we begin building, if I don't ensure that we section some elements of it to, the local community, training welders, training carpenters, then exactly what have we done in terms of building structure? Is that what we've done and walked away and we didn't? What's the legacy we leave behind? There is no legacy. So the next, the one I always used to have was when institutions would tell us, yes, you want to build a port, but who's going to be a port operator? You have to go and get a recognized world-class port operator. But how? How, Nadia? How do you get a how do your people become a world-class operator if you do not give them the opportunity
to try?
To try.
Exactly.
So are we as a continent going to depend on outside expertise for generations to come? Then I contest and put to you that we will always be where we are today, if that's what our modus operandi for development is.
Wow. That is so true. Thank you for that, Oliver. You are chairman or member of the board, as I said, of so many organizations, but there's one in particular, the Africa Center in London, for which you have been chairman of the board for many, many years. Can you tell us about that journey, please?
That was an interesting one. I think for me, it was a labor of love, but it was tough. Why did I take up the opportunity when invited to become the chairman? I don't know how often in those days one would walk past King Street, 38 King Street, or indeed come to Covent Garden, and you look around and you see that tattered old building. You see how derelict it was. You went in, which was once a thriving center. Once, in fact, if you like, the home, the bastion for the anti-apartheid movement in London. It was, in fact, where you had great thinkers, African debaters, great leaders of Africa pass through its corridors. But it had deteriorated. And for me, what I think moved me was the challenge of turning it around. That essentially was what moved me around. And that's why I took the task, even when many told me you've taken the poison chalice. It wasn't easy because my task was to prove that I was not going to stand for this place being portrayed as the center, as what Africa is all about today. The narrative for Africa is too negative. I mean, we have enough with how the narrative is being done in Africa. All we see is not the beauty that me and you see every day. You live in Gore. I've just come to wonderful Gambia, and yes, all is not a completely hunky-dory, but by goodness, there's some good things going on as well.
Oh, yes.
And yet, we don't show that. And this was one time I thought to myself, well, I may not know much about the arts. I may not know much about, that kind of environment. But one thing I do know is actually taking and turning around projects. And I took it on, and I took it on with a passion. And in it, to be honest with you, the challenges were, when I laid out my plan, I think in all fairness, I got very good support from the then Arts Council. I was able to bring together a team, and Nadia, you, your good self, later came in and joined that board of like-minded people that believe that surely not this building laced with with asbestos, with flooding. This cannot be what we are going to try and change. And yet we did make an attempt.
Yes.
It cost just about $1.5 million to try and put together a scheme, which would have been 12 million in 12 million pounds to change. But it just wasn't value for money. So the critics of myself, and there were a few, including late Bishop Tutu. I say it's late, I'm sorry if it's not, but he wrote to the Times, I remember very vividly. but I think he was misled in my view. But I think there were strands. There were the genuine ones who I think were quite right in saying, what's happening to our legacy? Why do these guys want to sell and move on to another? Will there be another home for the Africa Center? Then there were those who, quite frankly, were just myopic and could not see this vision that we had to have a more appropriate building fit for the 21st century, to have something that was not just physical, and as we have seen in this pandemic era, to be, if you like, what the net offered us, what the internet offered us, and be virtual as well. So it was tough. There were legal battles, but we finally got there. We finally managed to sell that derelict building for a princely sum of £10.5 million. We used, and we still own the freehold. We used that money to buy in the South Bank, which is the theatre land, and all the coming South Bank, a building of £4.5 million, twice the size. And we own that freehold as well. And today, under the able chairmanship of Obal Sugbe, QC, we and a group of young trustees, they're actually rebuilding it for a more appropriate center that can act, if you like, as a lab for all kinds of activities, not just the arts, but business, but education, and all of that. That the center more befitting. So all in all, Nadia, it was a battle I enjoyed, and a battle I'll do again, because I think the narrative for Africa must be one that we write, and nobody else.
Thank you, Oliver. That's a battle we shared, and I'm sure, just like me, you very much look forward to the new building that is being currently refurbished, and I have to say the plans look awesome. So
fantastic.
We have to keep watching that space and see what's going to happen. Very exciting.
And if you have any, even though I've moved away from it, but I'm still a member of the association, if you have listeners out there or viewers that want to get stuck in and help the center, please go on their website and volunteer for anything in the center.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Oliver, what in your trade, your activities make you a public speaker, and where do you get the confidence to stand and speak and to have people listening to you?
Well, I think in everything I try to restrict my public speaking. Very funny enough. As you know, this has been a long invite. That's I try to dodge, but I know I can't dodge for my sister there. Soon she was going to get me.
I would believe you.
Yeah. The thing is, I have to really, I think for my speaking engagements, I have to believe in what I say. To be able to communicate, you have to be able to believe in it. You have to have done your research, live it, work it, or whatever, and so that you know what you're communicating and the passion comes across. I hope so. And that's what I try to do I don't try to do too many of them, but the ones I participate in, I know that I bring something to the table or have done my research enough to be able to bring new ideas. And I do so unashamedly. And I would urge, for too long, I think young people, we haven't done so. We have shied away from actually putting our own viewpoint, and not in a very hostile way, but forcefully and respectfully. We should be able to communicate, but also listen to ideas. I always do one thing, is that even when challenged in public for us to try and understand, where is that questioner coming from? What are they trying to protect? What interests do they have? What also are the passions they have? How can we collectively come to a point where we can marry my position and theirs? And as public speaking, another trick I have of my trade is that when I do stand up to speak in public, I look at the audience, and I need to see and feel the audience very much. Even when you have a script, sometimes you have to abandon that script and go with what you think the audience is trying to deliver for them. The areas in which they're trying, you can see somebody down the road, down in a queue on a row, nodding or not agreeing with you or whatever, and you focus your attention and try and persuade them, just like you were. And I think then you're communicating. And I think that's what two tips I'll give you in my thing in public speaking.
Thank you so much. We're in 2021, and yet the theme of women in business remains vivid and it's still a challenge. What, according to you, can men do to advance women's empowerment?
Well, to be honest with you, let me start by saying that, and I will again have my emphasis. Well, I look at it, let me look at it from a global perspective first. If you look and see everywhere there has been upheavals, wars, just refugees. I will call some names: Myanmar, Syria, Tigray. A lot of the sufferers there are women. If you look at places where governments have failed in the security infrastructure, a lot of the people who suffer again are women. More so in Africa. In some places, we wake up every morning, mothers wake up to hundreds of their kids, their kids being kidnapped for one thing or another. It's a shame. I actually think if you look from independence today, quite frankly, the men have not delivered. And I put my hand up. We have not delivered. So therefore, I think the fact that we can just continue as normal in the way we've been doing things, as if, yes, well, the democratic, we will allocate a number of seats for women in parliament, we will do this. I mean, I'm not so sure that that piecemeal approach works. Honestly, I actually do think we must begin, our leaders must begin to appoint women. If you have to have all cabinet women, let there be an all cabinet women. If you have all cabinet full of women, if you have because I think they bring a different dimension that's been missing in our policies and our practicality of moving this continent forward. And I think it's the same in corporate life. If you look at our public sector in Africa today, public service, my God, you look at the public sector service we had 20 years ago and look at it today, we have, if you have the A team, then we have the Z team. And there's still a reluctance to bring some of our brightest people. Why? Because they happen to be women. Now, that can't be right. That can't be right. So I think, you know, I am not going to propose here more quota or whatever. No, I actually do think there has to be a paradigm shift. And for me, I quite frankly think it's about time men step away and let women take over the leadership positions in Africa with our support.
Wow. That is powerful. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you so much for that answer. Now, I am quite aware of time, and I know your time is very tight. So let me ask you, if you were speaking to your younger self, with the knowledge you have today, what are the 3 essential pieces of advice that you would give yourself to start a career?
Look at it as a journey, map out, even if you don't put it on paper, map out a strategy. And as soon as you leave uni, chart a course that you want, where you want to be in 7 years' time, in 10 years' time. And you have to have some flexibility because everything will not be the same.
Yes.
You then have to say to yourself, it has to be a mixture of paid employment. It has to be sometimes when you have to put some voluntary work in it as well. Travel, yes, do travel. Travel and see how other cultures live. You know, go there, not where, you know, mama's got a friend or dad has got a friend and send you. No, put your rucksack on and go see the world a little bit. Be brave about it. Don't be silly, but be brave and look at it. And then come back enlightened. Come back with your own thoughts. Come back with what you want to do. And sometimes, too many times I hear, oh, I don't like the job. Sometimes you take the job so that it gives you the exposure to move on to something else. And for me, also, it's been a combination of things. The fact that I had versatility. I could be an engineer. I did transport economics. I could go and work as a transport economics or in the logistics business. In the port and logistics business. I could also work in finance, like I've ended up doing. Or I can bring all 3 together. So versatility is also important. If you can, even if you're a doctor, why don't add an MSc in health policy development and finance or something? If you were an engineer, put something, you know, in management, so that you have some degree of versatility. that you can, that you can bring to the table. So when you sit somewhere and you're in the C-level suite, or you aspiring to get there, when you speak to an engineer, you understand them. When you speak to a development economist, you understand them. But also when you speak in your banking slang or whatever, on accounting slang, you're able to understand that fundamentals. Yes, you have something that you is your specialism, but also have some versatility. Versatility in terms of qualifications, versatility in terms of the geographies that you visited or worked in, versatility in language as well. I would urge you, I'm not a great French speaker, but I'm urging people today, please have a second language. And also understand the public sector. Too often we think it's only the private sector that matters. Spend some time and understand how governments work, how the public sector works, because you will deal with them when you're in the private sector. But again, versatility, that's the order of the day.
Versatility.
And of course, technology today. Versatility.
That is the main word. Thank you so much, Oliver, for those advices. Do you have any final message as we come to the end of this interview?
My final message, I think, is, again, you wouldn't be surprised, it's linked to my passion for Africa's development, is that we cannot continue to just be a consumer continent. We need to manufacture stuff. We can't let our commodities just be dug up and taken somewhere else. I mean, the biggest joke in all of this development framework is that somebody is giving money either from Africa or from one of the DFIs. They develop an iron ore mine, or they develop a bauxite mine, and there's no processing in Africa, no beneficiation. So people say, oh, we poured in money in development in Africa. But no, you didn't. You poured in money to a company who's come, taking our raw materials at a below market price, or even at market price, send it somewhere else to be where the real juice is, to be processed. That's where the value is, 80% or so, even sometimes 90% of the value. Same with our cocoa, our coffee, our tea. We've got to start doing some beneficiation in Africa. We need to create that wealth, and that wealth needs to stay in Africa. That is important. That's really, if I leave you with nothing today, please, that's an area that I think we must all work towards. The second one I like, it's the intra-African trade. My goodness. I cannot believe, being a consumer, we want to import from all over the world, then we lock at the doors for people to trade amongst each other. Have you ever been with the border between two African countries? Well, I've traveled between some borders between West Africa. I won't tell you the countries. But my goodness, it was a fortress. And you see a woman just probably taking bananas or mangoes across, and the hassle that they get.
Yes.
You would have thought they came from Mars. I just flew the other day, I told you. You would see how can I be leaving to go to an African country, and all along the way, since I entered the airport to the very moment that I land in the airport on the other side, it's one hassle or another. No, we should be facilitators of intra-African trade, not just pay lip service to this. I'm not asking for lip service. We've got too many treaties, and the latest one was Africa. We've got too many of those. We've got too many of those. Governments must be committed. They must be committed to putting it in practice. And that's making sure the people who police our borders become facilitators and not contrarians to stop trade. Thank you, ma'am.
Wow, Oliver, thank you so much. I mean, if anybody was doubting your passion for this continent of ours, I think they've got the answer. Wow, this was really, really insightful, and I know you have to run. So thank you. Thanks a million times from our audience, from Gilles, from the Acosphere team, and myself. Thank you very, very much. We wish you all the best, and I look forward to speaking to you very, very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I can let you go.
Thank you.
And for our audience, next week, same place, same time, we will be interviewing an international banker, a very seasoned banker, Habib Ashkar. You don't want to miss that interview either. It will be conducted by Gilles Acogny. Same place, same time. Thursday next week. Take good care of yourselves and stay blessed. Thank you again, Oliver. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.